As word of King Aerys' erratic and troubling behavior spread throughout the Seven Kingdoms, Lord Rickard Stark continued to serve his king faithfully as Warden of the North. The proud father of 4 children, his daughter Lyanna, was engaged to Robert Baratheon, the young lord of Storm's End. Centuries of peace between the North and the Iron Throne ended the day Rhaegar Targaryen, Prince of Dragonstone, abducted Lyanna. Enraged, Brandon Stark rode to King's Landing, demanding the release of his sister and the death of Rhaegar. Aerys arrested him for treason, and called his father to come to the capital to ransom him. When Lord Rickard complied, Aerys, now utterly mad, arrested him for treason as well. Lord Rickard demanded a trial by combat. Aerys declared fire the champion of House Targaryen, and had Lord Rickard suspended from the rafters of the throne room while pyromancers lit a blaze beneath him. As he burned, Brandon was brought into the throne room. A leather cord attached to a strangulation device was wrapped around his neck. Aerys told Brandon his father was a dead man, but there was a chance to save him. A longsword was placed on the floor just out of Brandon's reach, and the more he struggled to reach it, the more the cord tightened around his throat. Brandon Stark strangled himself, trying to free his father, who was roasted alive in his own armor. The entire court stood and watched this atrocity take place. Sir Jaime Lannister and the Kingsguard among them. The Mad King was reported to have laughed hysterically as these 2 noble men were tortured and brutally killed before him. Seeking to rid the world of all his supposed enemies, Aerys called for the head of Rickard's younger son, Eddard Stark, and Lyanna's betrothed, Robert Baratheon. He sent word to Lord Jon Arryn, who had fostered both young men at the Eyrie, to apprehend them. Instead, Lord Arryn joined houses Stark and Baratheon in rebellion. Robert vowed to kill Rhaegar Targaryen and get his beloved Lyanna back.
Aerys Targaryen was the last of his name to sit on the Iron Throne. Known far and wide as the Mad King, his was a reign of instability and terror. The Seven Kingdoms are well rid of him and his kind. Oh, he may have appeared to be a capable ruler at first, but that was due in no small part to his counselors, led by the hand of the king, Tywin Lannister. There may have been years of peace and prosperity during Aerys' reign, but it was Tywin who was really running the country as Aerys spiraled further and further into insanity. The dragon spawn were famous for losing their minds. It was the price they paid for centuries of keeping the bloodlines pure. And Aerys more than happily continued the noble sister-fucking tradition of his forefathers. As the years passed, Aerys' behavior became increasingly erratic. He cut himself so often on his Iron Throne, many referred to him as King Scab, though never to his face. It was rumored he had developed an obsession with wildfire, and was known to inflict horrific punishments on those he considered enemies, including burning them alive. As his paranoia and bloodlust grew, he had a bitter falling out with Lord Tywin, who had served the crown faithfully for 20 years. At least Tywin was able to leave the job with his life and fortunes intact. Subsequent hands of King Aerys weren't so fortunate. Then the Targaryens went too far. The Crown Prince Rhaegar abducted Lyanna Stark, daughter of Rickard Stark, the Lord of Winterfell. She was my betrothed. She was my beloved. Beautiful and spirited woman, and I loved her more than life itself. Rhaegar went south with Lyanna, hiding her away in Dorne. What harm he inflicted on the poor girl, the gods only know. Brandon Stark, Lyanna's eldest brother, was outraged. He rode to King's Landing to confront the king and demand his sister's safe return. Instead, Aerys had him executed, his father, Rickard Stark, as well. There wasn't much left to discuss after that. Aerys feared their loved ones would seek revenge for what he did. He was right to be afraid. Aerys wasted no time in calling for the heads of Brandon's younger brother, my friend, Eddard Stark. And my head too, of course. I'm sorry he didn't come looking for it himself. Alongside Jon Arryn of the Vale, the man who fostered Ned and I as children, Baratheons, Starks, and Tullys all called their banners. Once our rebellion began, the Mad King's days were numbered.
As Aerys Targaryen's behavior grew more and more erratic, the task of ruling the Seven Kingdoms fell to me, Tywin Lannister. I had served Aerys for nearly 20 years, and as a result, the realm had prospered. The royal coffers were full, the land was at peace. But Aerys grew increasingly hostile, jealous of the success many credited to me. My power and influence unnerved him. The captain of my personal guard, Sir Elyn Payne, was once overheard making offhand comments regarding who was the true ruler of Westeros. When the king was given this information, he had Elyn Payne's tongue ripped out with hot pincers. It was my desire to unite the houses of Lannister and Targaryen through marriage. My daughter Cersei would marry Aerys' eldest son, Prince Rhaegar. Such a union made perfect sense for all parties. However, Aerys' senses had begun to leave him quite some time earlier. Instead of uniting the royal family with its most loyal and powerful ally, Aerys chose instead to insult my family, indicating that such a match was beneath Rhaegar. Instead, he chose Elia Martell of Dorne to be Rhaegar's wife. As if to rub salt in my wounds, Aerys appointed Jaime, my son, to the King's Guard. The King's Guard may be an honor for lesser families than ours, but it is a lifetime appointment that forces him to renounce all family holdings. This creates a difficulty in naming an heir to Casterly Rock. But Aerys knew all that. I had grown tired of the King's constant provocation. Thus, I resigned my post as Aerys' hand and returned to Casterly Rock with my considerable forces. When Robert Baratheon rebelled against the throne, Aerys grew fearful that I would join with Robert's forces and rise against him. He thought himself clever and kept Jaime very close, as if warning me. He sunk deeper and deeper into delusion, paranoia, and violence. I've heard it said he became obsessed with wildfire, a substance which, once lit, cannot be extinguished. Convinced he had enemies all around him, he wouldn't allow blades in his presence, save for those of his King's Guard. Alas, that proved to be his undoing.
The Targaryen dynasty united the Seven Kingdoms and lasted nearly 3 centuries. It was a dynasty forged in fire, sealed in blood, and destroyed by rebellion. The Targaryens are blood of the dragon, descended from the nobility of ancient Valyria, a once mighty empire in the east. When the cataclysmic doom laid waste to Valyria and its people, the Targaryens survived, having settled on the island fortress of Dragonstone years before. They remained there for a century, until the rise of Aegon the Conqueror. Instead of attempting to reclaim the eastern lands of his ancestors, Aegon sailed west for the Seven Kingdoms, his sisters Visenya and Rhaenys at his side. To keep the bloodlines pure, Aegon continued the custom of his Valyrian ancestors and took both of his sisters to wife. Together, they came ashore on the eastern coast of Westeros. Their blazon, a dragon with 3 heads, representing Aegon and his sister wives. Their words, fire and blood. While their host was small in comparison to the armies of Westeros that awaited them, Aegon and his sisters had a secret weapon, the last of the dragons. He conquered every kingdom save Dorne, which eventually bowed to Targaryen rule a century later. He had the swords of his enemies melted down by the fiery breath of his dragon, Balerion the Black Dread, and forged into the Iron Throne. The capital city of King's Landing was built on the eastern coast, where Aegon and his sisters first came ashore, and Aegon ordered the construction of a royal castle on its highest hill, the Red Keep. For 300 years, the Targaryen dynasty stayed strong in the face of rebellion, civil war, and plague. But the line of Dragon Kings was broken when my father, Aerys Targaryen, the second of his name, was overthrown in rebellion. My father was betrayed and slaughtered by Ser Jaime Lannister, a member of his own Kingsguard. His son and heir, my brother Rhaegar, perished on the field of battle at the hands of Robert Baratheon, who claimed the Iron Throne for himself. And so today, the only surviving members of the storied Targaryen dynasty are myself, Prince Viserys, rightful King of the Andals and ruler of the 7 Kingdoms, and my sister, Daenerys. We were spirited away to the free cities of the East by loyalists. Here we have lived in exile ever since, dreaming of a day when we will cross the narrow sea and take back my father's throne.
Rebellion. The crimes of House Targaryen were too heinous to go unanswered. The noble houses of Baratheon, Stark, and Arryn united to oppose and overthrow the line of the cursed Dragon Kings. While Ned Stark and Arryn secured an alliance with the Tullys of Riverrun, I called the banners of Storm's End and rode out in force against the Mad King and his minions. Gods, those were some battles. Our first victory occurred at Summerhall, where I faced off against an army of dragon loyalists and won 3 battles in a single day. 3 in one day. 7 hells, that was a glorious day. We tried to take Ashford Castle in the Reach, but the Tyrells beat us back. We had to regroup. My army was pursued north by Aerys's army and took refuge in the Stony Sept in the Riverlands. When the Targaryen army entered the town, the Sept bells tolled, a signal to the townspeople of the battle that was to come. As the Targaryens searched from house to house for me, the combined forces of Ned Stark and the Tullys swept into the city. Gods, what a day that was. It's now known as the Battle of the Bells. We overwhelmed the Mad King's forces and sent them scampering back to King's Landing. Aerys's son, Rhaegar, who started the whole damn thing, finally emerged from hiding in the south and assembled his own army to face us. As for the Mad King, he must have been pissing himself. The battle that would decide the fate of the 7 Kingdoms occurred at the crossing of the Green Fork of the Trident River. Rhaegar commanded the royal host, which was some 40,000 strong. My forces were outnumbered by nearly 5,000 men, but that didn't matter. They were fresh, but we were battle-hardened and had justice on our side. As the battle raged around us, I faced off with Rhaegar, the stag and the dragon right there in the ford of the river. I fought with the fury of 10 men, raining blow after blow upon that vile prince before burying my warhammer in his chest. I hit him so hard, the rubies on his armor broke free, flinging them into the stream. They call it the Ruby Ford now. With that scum Rhaegar dead and the royal army shattered, our next move was to make for King's Landing. But I'd sustained a few wounds in the battle and was unable to ride. I sent Ned Stark to the capital to face the Mad King and make him pay for his crimes.
The Targaryens, blood of the dragon, and the last of old Valyria, were loved by their subjects, and admired far and wide as the greatest dynasty in the history of the Western world. But the peace and prosperity of nearly 3 centuries of Targaryen rule was shattered by the usurper, Robert Baratheon, and his band of traitors. House Baratheon owed its very existence to the Targaryens. Was it not Aegon the Dragon himself who elevated the bastard Orys Baratheon in the War of Conquest? And what of the Starks, the Lannisters, the Aarons of the Vale? All had been spared and allowed to keep their lands when Aegon could easily have wiped them out. Centuries later, the usurper and his lackeys repaid Aegon's benevolence with treachery. There are some who dare to claim Robert and his allies had reason to rebel. They say the Crown Prince stole the usurper's lady love. They say my father, King Aerys, murdered Rickard Stark and his son without just cause. Whether these charges are true or not, it doesn't matter. The dragon answers to no one. Aerys' good name has been besmirched in the years since the rebellion. He's been called a dangerous madman, a monster, a tyrant that brought his tragic end upon himself. Lies! My father was a victim of weaklings in his council, lackwits who failed him in his hour of need and let the rebellion spin out of control. But it was not enough. The royal army was crushed at the Battle of the Trident. It was there the valiant Rhaegar met Robert in single combat, but the gods betrayed him, and he perished by the usurper's hand. As the field of fire had marked the end of the Andal centuries before, the Battle of the Trident seemed to herald the end of the Dragon Kings. When word reached the capital of my brother Rhaegar's death, my father Aerys moved to protect me, as I was the surviving heir to the throne. He sent me to the island fortress of Dragonstone, along with my mother, Queen Rhaela, who was great with child. But as my father, my king, Aerys Targaryen, prepared to defend his throne to the bitter end, little did he know of the horrors and betrayals that awaited him and our family.
Ours is the fury. These are the words of the Black Stag of Baratheon. A battle cry echoed throughout the land in rebellion when I, Robert Baratheon, the first of his name, seized the Iron Throne from the Mad King Aerys Targaryen, ending a dynasty nearly 300 years old. House Baratheon was born in the Wars of Conquest, when Aegon the Dragon invaded Westeros. Aegon sent his commander, Orys Baratheon, to take Storm's End. Argilac the Arrogant, the last of the Storm Kings, foolishly left the safety of his stronghold and met the Baratheon warlord in open battle. Argilac was soundly defeated, and Orys took his lands, his holdings, and his daughter. Orys was said to be a half-brother to Aegon Targaryen. If this were true, a little blood of the dragon mingled with that of the stag in those days. The seat of House Baratheon is Storm's End, a legendary keep raised in the Age of Heroes. It overlooks Shipbreaker's Bay, where legend has it that Durin, the first Storm King, raised the keep with the aid of Bran the Builder of House Stark, forging a centuries-long connection with the Stormlands and the North. After Aegon's conquest of the Seven Kingdoms, the Baratheons remained loyal enough to the crown while Targaryen kings came and went. But loyalty has its limits. When Rhaegar Targaryen, Aerys's vile son and heir, abducted Lyanna Stark, my betrothed, my beloved, it was time to act. We raised our banners, Baratheon, Stark, Jon Arryn and the Tullys, united in rebellion against Rhaegar and his father, the Mad King. We were victorious and took the Iron Throne. That bit of dragon blood in my veins came in well, as it made me a distant relation to the Targaryen dynasty blood of my long-lost ancestor, Orys. The truth of it is, I took it. I sit on the Iron Throne. I rule the Seven Kingdoms from the Red Keep.